everyone, and welcome to my channel. If you were just joining me for the very first time, I am Kabir and I'm a travel blogger. I make videos about cruise ships and airplanes, and this time I got caught in the Air Canada strike, and it led to a pretty interesting series of events. I'm going to share with you what that story entailed, in addition to what type of compensation that you're entitled to if you ever do get stuck in a similar situation. So be sure to stay tuned. So let's start with the flight over. First, I flew out of Toronto on Air Canada's business class aboard a Boeing 777-300ER. Now, the hard product itself, the seat, the comfort, the amenities, honestly was great. I'm going to have more coming up in another video in a full review for that, but what I noticed was that the flight attendants were not in exactly the best of moods. I think that the sentiment of the upcoming strike and Air Canada's unwillingness to negotiate with them was what was behind this. Now, while it wasn't completely their fault, I did feel like the passengers were the ones that were taking the brunt of the frustration in this case. I get it though, I would be just as annoyed, and based on what happened, it was really the passengers that paid the price, as well as Air Canada and their team. Now, more on that later, but still, overall the flight to London was awesome. Then, I got to enjoy what I actually came out for, and that was a family wedding. It was amazing. I had times with relatives, it was amazing, it was so much fun, and we're gonna fast forward at this point to what happened when I needed to go home. So, I'm at the wedding reception, and I get a text and an email from Air Canada saying that my flight has been canceled. Now, this was pretty expected. We knew this was gonna happen. The text said that they were going to try and find us an alternative itinerary and to stand by. Our flight originally was on Saturday afternoon, which was the following day. They told us not to go to the airport, so we didn't. Instead, we followed our original plan, and on Sunday morning, we headed to London. Instead of going to the airport, though, we booked ourselves into the Marriott Garden Inn near Earl's Court. That was £300 out of pocket, by the way, and we didn't get any information from Air Canada, nor was there any available flights to book onto, and in addition, the few that were available were completely, extremely expensive. But I made the best of it, and I explored the city, and I went to the British Museum, and I finally got to see the Rosetta Stone, so I was really pleased to have an extra day in London. It was pretty cool. Now, here's where things get a little bit messy. My uncle told us later that evening that if you wanted to get anything booked, really and truly, you've got to go to the airport. So my parents went to Heathrow Airport that night, but Air Canada at their desks had closed, and they said to come back at 4:30 a.m., which is when they were going to be reopening. And so there I was at Heathrow Airport at 4:30 a.m. on Sunday morning. And there were only a few people that were in line with us, and the counter had just opened, but we ended up still waiting for 3 hours to speak to someone. So the staff there said that Air Canada has told people not to go to the airports as they've been avoiding it getting too crowded, and they don't have the crowd control there. But ironically, the only way to actually speak to someone was to go to the airport. So I'm not sure what the plan was there, just not inform people and just go to the airport. But anyway, we tried to call in, nobody answered, and so many of the people that I'd spoken to there said that they just got hung up on after waiting for hours and hours on the phone. Now, the first person that we spoke to at the airport said that they couldn't help us and that they were a contractor, not an actual Air Canada staff member. And because we were on an Aeroplan ticket, she just told us that we needed to call in and they couldn't help us at the airport, which of course was impossible. Nobody was answering the phones at Air Canada. We insisted on speaking to an Air Canada representative very politely, and finally, we got to speak to an actual Air Canada employee. And let me tell you, she was a hero. She fought so hard for us for over an hour and managed to secure us a new itinerary. And I think this came down to training. She knew how their systems worked, and she didn't have to spend that much time on us, really and truly, but she stuck with it. And I'm going to be forever grateful to her. So if you're watching this, thank you so much. Big shout out to her and all of the frontline Air Canada employees. I know that they're just doing their best during this mess. None of this is their fault. This is all on Air Canada corporate and leadership for not supporting their teams in the field and providing adequate support. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But from there, I received a room at a nearby hotel plus meal vouchers. But there's always a but. The instructions to get to the hotel were completely messed up and they were just incorrect. So we were first directed to follow the signs toward the Sofitel and to the Hilton Garden Inn. There was a crowd of other people that we saw earlier that were there. They were very confused because there was no Hilton Garden Inn there. So then I called another Hilton Garden Inn and it wasn't that one. We went to another one that was incorrect and then were directed to the correct one. I mean, so we hoped. It wasn't 100%. They just said, yeah, it could be us. So at this point, we're just playing whack-a-mole with the Hiltons around there. But anyway, not 100%. That said, they did announce to us that they had a shuttle. But then when we got to the shuttle, we figured out it wasn't free and it made more sense for us to just Uber. So we did. And eventually, I arrived at the Hilton Terminal 5, which is nowhere near Terminal 5. Of course, all the Uber receipts are saved so that we're going to claim them back later because it was quite a hefty price tag there. But anyway, finally arrived at the hotel around 12:30 p.m. And the hotel itself was actually awesome. The rooms were large, the food was excellent, and it was such a relief. I did run into one issue, though, that wasn't a big deal, but it kind of became one. I had food vouchers for lunch and dinner and then breakfast the following day, but no lunch the following day since our flight was the following evening. And so that evening, I asked the front desk about lunch vouchers for the following day. That conversation went downhill so fast. The agent literally told me that since we only had one night, that was all the food that we were entitled to, and he said to contact Air Canada for more. Then he ignored my questions and what I was trying to say to him, and when I calmly asked for a manager to speak to, he ripped up the note that he had written me with some further information and told me that he could evict me from the hotel at his discretion. This was a complete overreaction. Like, I was shocked. I was shaking. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't angry. I was totally calm. But it just reminded me of how powerless I was in this scenario. There was no accountability from anybody. Air Canada didn't care. The hotel was under a contract and they didn't care. Nobody's going to follow up about this. Like, any complaint I could put anywhere relating to any of this is just going to get lost in the bin. So I felt completely powerless and upset. And honestly, I felt ashamed. Like, this was a low point in this whole process. Nothing about this process was easy. Zero. Nothing. The answers that we got for everything up until this point was mostly no, and then we had to advocate for ourselves, and then we finally managed to get ahead. But it was hard, and the situation at the hotel also gave me some perspective. As passengers, we ourselves are stressed, but so were the staff and the crews that were caught in the middle of dealing with all of this. More on that in a sec. But finally, the next afternoon, it was time to head back to Canada. And here's a silver lining. Virgin Atlantic. Okay? Our itinerary was to fly aboard the Airbus A350 from London to New York and then to Buffalo on Delta. Virgin Atlantic was fantastic. Check-in was easy and smooth. It was on time. Boarding was quick. The crew was positive and kind. And surprisingly, my seat had a ton of room. And they gave us a blanket and headphones. They even had a tail camera and a belly camera. And for an airplane geek like me, that was enough to send me into the stratosphere. That was amazing. The in-flight entertainment was great, and soon enough, it was time for dinner. Then they even had mile-high tea, which was so cute. Their economy product truly is excellent. I'm going to have more on that in a full flight review video on this channel, so make sure to stay tuned because it was fantastic. I also am going to have a video on Air Canada's business class, so be sure to subscribe so you can come along on that flight with me as well. Soon enough, we landed at JFK, and things went pretty smoothly with customs and rechecking our bags and going through security, and after a 2-hour-long layover, I boarded a Delta CRJ 900 to Buffalo. I was in the very last row next to the flight attendant. There's 5 of us in that row. It was tight, to say the least, but I knew it was a quick flight and that it was the final phase of this entire process. Except after we landed, we just sat outside the gate for 45 minutes, waiting on the ground crew. We were so close, yet so far. But anyway, we got off the plane. It was fine. My brother was there to pick me up, and eventually I crossed the border into Canada, and I made it back to my condo in Toronto at 4 a.m. So to put that into perspective, we left the hotel in London at about 1 p.m. local time, and I walked into my place 19 hours later, and also 3 days late. So really, it was like almost 4 days. But anyway, so what does this mean in terms of compensation? Well, since my flight was departing from the UK, I was covered under UK and EU section 261 of passenger rights. That means that I'd be entitled to up to £520 or 600 euros depending on the distance of my flight, which in this case is the full amount. Plus, airlines are required to provide meals and accommodations if you're stranded overnight, which is why we got that hotel and the vouchers for the second night, not the first one, because we have to get that. Anyway, they have to pay me back for that one. And since I didn't get anything from Air Canada about that until I went to the airport, we're going to get compensated for that. But there is a catch. If you are within Canada, Air Canada is going to argue that a strike is an extraordinary circumstance and therefore not eligible for compensation because it's outside of the airline's control. Not true, but that is what the law says here in Canada. It's still worth submitting a claim anyway. You can do that directly on their website. Just go to sset.aircanada.com and you'll get into a portal. Now, you will need your ticket number. It depends on where your flight originated from, though. There are different sets of guidelines depending on where you are in the world, so let me go ahead and break it down for you as best I can. So for the UK and the EU departures, they give you clear, fixed compensation that I mentioned earlier. Canada and other regions, including the United States, don't offer cash for strikes, but you still deserve rebooking, refunds, and proof-based reimbursement. Now, you can use Air Canada's self-serve tool first, but if it says that you're ineligible based on your ticket number, use their lost baggage or damaged baggage claim portal. You can use that portal to start a claim with Air Canada if the cancellation portal doesn't allow you to. Now, this has to do with the Air Canada rep that I spoke to at Heathrow. Whether it actually works in practice, I'm not 100% sure. This is just the advice I was given. If that doesn't work, you can escalate it through the UK Civil Aviation Authority or even Small Claims Court. But my advice is always keep your receipts, take notes, and just submit everything, even if your case seems ineligible. Worst case, you're no worse off, but best case, you do get your money back. And we really need to be reaching out to our elected officials and representatives from wherever you are in the world to tell them that we need more stringent rights for passengers and to hold airlines accountable for their actions. I navigated this system and found every single step to be a massive hurdle. And I can't imagine if I was someone that was less tech savvy or elderly. There was zero duty of care on Air Canada's part as a whole. Just a few gems, a few employees that went above and beyond to help, and I'm so grateful to them. So that was my trip from luxury on Air Canada's business class to the beauty of a family wedding to stress and chaos and finally the redemption of Virgin Atlantic, an airline that truly flies above. Travel teaches you patience, perspective, and sometimes humility. And in this case, I'm so glad that the flight attendants got what they needed. Shame on Air Canada for letting it come to this and for being nothing but ignorant and difficult to deal with when it came to helping their customers actually get to where they needed to go. I'm going to be posting a full review on Virgin Atlantic's Airbus A350 economy product very soon, as well as a review of Air Canada's business class. Maybe I'll let the water just settle a little bit. But first, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss it. If you've ever been stuck in an airline situation like this, please drop your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear about how you managed. I'm also here to answer any questions that pop up. And until next time, thank you so very much for flying with me and travel safe.